Hello again. Another update after my last video. I want to be aware and comment on what I see the reaction as being in general. A lot of people were alarmed by what I pointed out. A lot of people are just appalled by it and don't want anything to do with this discussion at all because they think on an almost superstitious level that I'm inviting the kind of horrible attack that can be perpetrated on us just by pointing it out. And I don't think you can avoid problems by sticking your fingers in your ears and pretending they're not coming. I'm trying to anticipate what I believe what an unpleasant consequence of Core 30 will be. I'm trying to get ahead of it and demonstrate to the world that we can self-regulate Bitcoin. If we can't do that, and we reach a threshold of unpleasant content in the blockchain and a norm of it being in everyone's mempools, despite people having control over what ends up in their mempools, unilateral control on an individual level, all of this being full of absolutely horrific media, we're going to tell the world we can't self-regulate, and then regulation will be imposed upon us and we won't be able to defend ourselves. Philosophically, I already made the point in the last video that treating transactions as equal is not equivalent to treating all data as just ones and zeros. These are in completely different ballparks, and people have confused one fight for a much larger and much more indefensible fight. For reasons I've already stated, all UTXOs must be treated as equal because money has to be fungible in order to work. I cannot fundamentally say that I am going to allow someone to buy a burger using Bitcoin, or I'm going to not allow someone to buy a weapon or something involved in some activity I really dislike. I can't discriminate against those two things. Firstly, because Bitcoin makes it basically impossible because of its pseudonymous nature, so it's pretty congruent with that anyway, which is great. But second off, more philosophically, I think it's morally defensible to say all UTXOs are equal. All $10 bills are equal. I don't care about its origin. There is no good money and bad money. There is just money. And saying one Bitcoin does not equal one Bitcoin means it's not money. Now, what's happening, in my estimation, is that Bitcoiners are getting high on their own farts and looking at this and saying, well, if all transactions are equal, as long as they're valid or invalid, being the only differentiator, and transactions are just ones and zeros, then are all ones and zeros equal? This is a very different battle, and it's one I'm not going to fight because it's indefensible. We cannot say that all data is equal because it's all just ones and zeros, because that's fundamentally not how the world works. Money is a weird, abstract thing. Data isn't. Data is just, if you have nasty media, that's something that you go out of your way to avoid. If you see someone posting disgusting stuff on social media that's not going to get them kicked off, but you find it horrible, you're going to block it. You're not going to want to see it. You're going to want to mute the relevant words. You're going to make sure that you don't come across it for very good reason. And people will judge you if you don't. And they're right to do so. This is the thing. Before we get into the blockchain, I'm just talking about people running servers in their house. That after Core 30, it's going to be normalized that these random strangers you're connecting to on an unregulated P2P network, which is not how anyone is used to using the internet, they're running a server for the first time, they're connecting to random people, and those random people can now, instead of uploading 80-byte contiguous files, can upload 100 kilobyte contiguous files. Those people are being reckless. I've run it through my own analysis multiple times. How reckless are you fundamentally for setting up a server in your house that anyone can connect to over the public internet that they can just upload random 100 kilobyte files to? It's extremely reckless, and no one would tell you otherwise. And the only reason it's attempting to be something that's placated as a legitimate thing to do that we're just going to have to deal with the unpleasant consequences of, is because Bitcoiners have this attitude of treating some specific type of data with neutrality. And I'm saying I can defend one approach. I can't defend the other by virtue of having to do the former. Bitcoin doesn't get to say it's an arbitrary file storage network by virtue of having to be a neutral monetary network. They're not the same thing. One is much harder to defend than the other, and it's wrong to defend it. That's the difference. If I have a server in my house that I have if I have a credible way of countering different types of data and prioritizing one over the other, and that tool is available to me and I'm aware of it and I don't use it, then I'm culpable. And I'm not talking about the legal implications of it. I'm not looking externally. I'm talking about me. I will stand up to the world and say, yeah, I processed a transaction where someone was sending money to WikiLeaks and you consider that a terrorist organization or something like that. I will stand up and say, yeah, I processed that. Well, I approve of that, so okay, fair enough, that's not the best example. I will also stand up and say, I approve of a transaction entering my mempool that's a horrible person paying another horrible person to do a horrible act. I will defend that because I believe money needs to be neutral. That's just the reality of it. Just like I will defend car driving, even though sometimes people get hit and killed. I think it's on balance worth it, and everyone agrees with that. It's just if you frame it in a sufficiently cherry-picked manner, you can make someone look like they're advocating for horrible actions like murder or, deliberately assaulting someone with your vehicle. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that I understand the trade-offs and I think they're worth it. I think the defense of a neutral monetary network is worth it. Neutral file storage is not. No one is going to say that because horrible stuff exists, horrible media is out there, and you have the mechanism to prevent it from happening. If you're not using it, then you are morally culpable. You're liable. And no one is going to buy your excuse because it's the lamest wishy-washy techno-babble excuse ever of, if I don't turn my Bitcoin node into a file server that anyone can upload 100 kilobyte files to, if I don't do that, then Bitcoin won't be censorship resistant anymore. Even though it always was, and I wasn't doing it up until this point. It's not a credible argument, it's a lie. So you're telling people I'm going to be a dumb file storage server where I have unilateral control over what ends up on my computer. I'm going to do that because I was told that Bitcoin needs that to be censorship resistant when it clearly doesn't. No one's going to buy that. And that's what this comes down to. When we come under attack because there's a certain amount of content in the blockchain that people are appalled by, we need to have a reasonable defense that people of principle and courage and conviction that can only come from doing things they are morally convinced of the righteousness of are prepared to stand up and say this was okay and I will defend having done this. No one is going to defend having run a node that was filled up with illicit media that they could have perfectly easily prevented, that they didn't need to turn a blind eye to for any sort of lofty ambition of making Bitcoin censorship resistant because it's demonstrably completely unnecessary. It's an indefensible thing to do. Running a Bitcoin node just becomes a thing that it's a thing that people do without any sort of moral responsibility or obligation to their own ethics. They just thoughtlessly do something that they wouldn't do in any other context because it's been shoehorned in backwards by people trying to shift the Overton window of what it is Bitcoiners will accept towards treating all data as arbitrary. I'm trying to find ways to put this more concisely for obvious reasons because it's just, I don't think this is not overly cerebral. This is a fundamental about what Bitcoiners are being asked to do. Bitcoiners are being asked to say to the world, hey, I treat all transactions as equal, even if they're people paying for stuff that we all find morally reprehensible. Bitcoiners are being asked to demonstrate that. And it's been hard for years telling the world that we're prepared to do that. People will sit up there and tell us, people are using this to buy drugs, and people are using this to buy porn, and people are using this to fund terrorism. People have been saying that against Bitcoin for years, and we've been saying, don't care. It's worth it to have a neutral monetary network. Now we want to change that into treating all data as equal. We want you now to justify actually storing illicit, horrible content directly, not financial records of people paying for horrible stuff. We want you to store the horrible stuff. Do you see the bait and switch? That's different. A transaction history of something that involved activity you don't like is not in and of itself horrible. It's documentation of something horrible having happened. Whereas media itself can in and of itself be disgusting and horrible, and you have the responsibility not to spread it around. And if you have the responsibility, people can say, well, you lacked the tools to be able to do it, so it's still justifiable. But we don't. Filters exist, they demonstrably work, and they're not doing any harm to Bitcoin. So removing them just means we are not prepared to take responsibility for ourselves. And the computers we run in our own houses, we are not capable of cleaning up our own mess. And all that does is invite an outraged mob of people riled up, rightly, over the content that is being relayed around a permissionless network and getting stored immutably in a blockchain. And it looks like we're doing absolutely nothing against it. And then we come out there with this list of embarrassingly paper-thin justifications for being so lax and so slapdash about what it is we're doing here. It's not good enough. It's not going to fly as an excuse. I can't defend it anymore. I can defend neutral monetary activity. I can't defend neutral file storage. And the only way I would be able to bring myself to is if I say there is no meaningful difference. But there is a meaningful difference. There's no... In theory, they're the same thing. In practice, they're very different. I can tell the difference between a Bitcoin transaction that I will treat as equal to any other Bitcoin transaction. I can tell the difference between that and something that's been made to look like a Bitcoin transaction that's really a massive file. Op return is that distinction. It's saying, hi, I'm not a valid output. Data. It's literally telling you that, and we made a compromise and said, we'll allow you to store tiny amounts of data using that method. 40 to 80 bytes, depending on whether you're running core or not and what year it is. That's not enough to harm people with. It's just a hash. 80 bytes is what? A 16 by 16 black and white pixel, like 16 by 16 pixels image that's probably in black and white. You can't do any harm with that. No one's going to say, that's disgusting. Like, okay, you can make a swastika with it or something. Big deal. Like, trolls on that level aren't enough to bring down the project. Detailed, high-resolution images that are in and of themselves disgusting, that are declaring themselves in a trivial capacity as something you could filter out of your mempool, that you turn a blind eye to, invites incredible scrutiny upon Bitcoiners that no one is going to want to defend. They have all these embarrassingly fake, transparently dishonest arguments saying, I have to do this to make Bitcoin censorship resistant and to make block propagation work properly. I'm telling you, you don't have that as a rationalization. They are not good enough reasons. No one is going to care. When outraged grandmas and, politicians go on these massive campaigns against Bitcoin, which they obviously want to do and they have been doing forever, they're not going to be convinced by your argument that you believed what you were doing was necessary to maintain a neutral monetary network. Because A, you're not true in saying that, and B, even if you were, it's way too subtle. You can't win against an argument that emotional. And people are accusing me of fear-mongering and spreading emotional crap to try and, get everyone riled up. I'm trying to get ahead of that being done to us. It's very, very different. I know what's coming. I've been very pragmatic. I know the kinds of attack people want to throw at Bitcoin, and all we're doing is making that easy for them. And it's a question of plausible deniability. That's all it comes down to. If we can say there's some nasty stuff in inscriptions, and here's, again, I reiterate why op return is such a significant change, making that big. If you're putting inscriptions in the chain, and it's clear that you're storing arbitrary data, but you've had to hack it to pieces in order to get Bitcoin to tolerate it, Bitcoin as an ecosystem is saying, this stuff is not stuff I solicit. People are having to hack themselves and tie themselves in knots in order to make me accept it. That's plausible deniability, because you're saying they are not using the system for the purpose it was constructed for, and we don't like what they're doing and we're making it awkward for them. That gives you genuine plausible deniability. It's genuine. Of course you can filter out inscriptions too, so I don't want to take this argument too far. You should filter out inscriptions. They are an abuse of Bitcoin. But the fact that people are having to hack their way into Bitcoin in the first place tells you that's not Bitcoin. Those are hackers exploiting the system. We can point to that and say, they're not us. We don't approve of what they're doing. We are making their life difficult. That's an important thing to be able to say if you don't want to look obviously morally culpable for what they're doing. But op return says, welcome. Here you are. We are a file storage network. You don't need to hack anything in. You just need to create a Bitcoin transaction that says, hi, here's an unspendable output, data. That's all it does. That is a red carpet treatment. And anyone doing horrible stuff inside op returns, they are going to point to the Bitcoin network themselves and say, blame them. And once you get too many actors exploiting it, then it just becomes Bitcoin's fault. And we have no defense at that point because we rolled out the red carpet for these people. This is a watertight claim I'm making. And I hate the fact that if I bring it up, I get accused of being the perpetrator of this horrible stuff because people are just children and unable to have adult conversations about real risks coming down the line. And it's time to wake up. People are being stupid. I do, like, even bringing this up, it made a lot of people being uncomfortably transparent. There's a lot of people I know that are on my side that the minute I brought this up, they're like, no, stop talking about this. This is going to lose us support. This is going to create problems. At the end of the day, I believe what I'm saying to be true. I know it's an uncomfortable topic. I felt gross talking about it for the last few days. I know what's happening here. It's horrible, but it has to be addressed because that's how you self-regulate. You have to deal with the fact that people are going to do horrible stuff. If you want to be true about Bitcoin being an adversarial network and you having to design it with those principles in mind, this is the ultimate expression of that. The reputational damage that we are setting ourselves up for by rolling out the red carpet for becoming a neutral, arbitrary file storage network with our blessing is not something we can recover from. And we are nothing if we have no reputation. We've spent forever trying to fix it. And we've just about managed to do it. The amount of money people have made and the amount of education and discussion and reshaping people's economic models that has to be done to make people understand why even a deflationary currency is good and why transactions must be treated as neutral and why we must consume so much energy and why all this is justified. It's been an enormous burden. And right now with this tiny little change of, it makes no technical difference, it's like, it reminds me of that quote, nothing important happened today, that some guy wrote. I should learn the origin of that, but it was like the biggest world-changing event ever happened and someone thought it was a non-event, or they at least labeled it as such. It's a very subtle change that says 40 bytes, 80 bytes, let's just make it 100,000 bytes. They can store that in the chain anyway if they want. Right, but not with our blessing until core 30. And once they have our blessing, we no longer have our plausible deniability. And we're no longer entitled to it because we gave it up. This completely changes everything. It makes us morally culpable. And I hate the fact that this all sounds like advocacy of inscriptions because they're convoluted and they're clearly a hack. Obviously, I don't advocate for that either because I take this logically. If you accept my position here, you continue down the path and you say, well, if I can discriminate what ends up on my computer in my mempool. Remember, I'm not talking about the blockchain here. I'm just talking about my mempool, which you have complete sovereignty over and in which filters are 100% effective, even if people keep saying they don't work, Adam Beck. It's complete unilateral control over what ends up on a server in my house. And every time an arbitrary data storage and a way of enveloping arbitrary data inside Bitcoin transactions, every time one of those becomes popular, it becomes trivial for me to filter it. The cat and mouse game works. I don't care about the tiny mice. I do care about the giant, megalithic, monstrous rodents that move at, an eighth of a mile an hour because they're so big. Those are the giant institutions spamming Bitcoin, and they spend months in research and development. They have ecosystems which rely entirely on one method in which they are inscribing data into Bitcoin, and it's trivial to add filters for that stuff. And that's the best effort basis on which you have to take responsibility and you have to accept moving targets for preventing bad things going wrong in your life and being able to hold your head up at the end of the day and say, I'm doing my best. Accidents happen, but if you're coming at me saying, you're responsible for something bad happening, I'm going to say, here's the methods, here's what I did to prevent it from happening. And anyone reasonable should be able to say, fair enough, you did your best. That's what mempool filters are. They're not censorship. Bitcoin's censorship resistance is not downstream of us not having mempool filters because we've always had them, so clearly that's a stupid assertion. So anyway, that is a brief update. I just want to apologize for the discomfort of having to discuss such a horrible topic. I'm doing so because I feel it's necessary. This is not a political stunt. I did see a lot of NOTS adoption after I spoke about it. I also saw some people being like, idiot, gross, what are you doing? Shut up. I supported you until now. I don't care. At the end of the day, I'm going to say what I think is correct. I've been doing that on this channel for years now. And it's the principle of, I mean, what do they talk about? Isaiah's job, right? And the remnant. I'm just saying what I think. And when I'm wrong, I will change my opinion on it. It's political suicide doing that. But I can't do it any other way because I have to put my heart and soul into this and I have to defend stuff that I believe to be right and I can't fake that. So that's why I'm bringing this topic up. It's genuine. I'm saying it not to be inflammatory and to create loads of problems. Obviously, people take it and turn it into sound bites. Core developers are all pedos and stuff like that. Obviously, that's overly simplistic and people are going to start characterizing it as that. And I know I'm paving the way for that to happen by raising the concern, but the concern is legitimate. It's not the same as what people want to equivocate and say, what's the difference between storing an 100 kilobyte op return, storing horrible media in an 100 kilobyte op return, and breaking it up into chunks inside an inscription? There's no meaningful difference. They both have to be passed out. They're both not the raw file itself. And they keep talking about encryption as well. I'm not even going to get into that because it's such a bad argument. So yeah, I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. I'm not trying to come across as defensive here or like doubling down on a mistake. I'm absolutely sure that this is a correct thing to raise the alarm over, and it's specific to op return, and it's a mistake for us to turn a blind eye to arbitrary data when we have the tools to discriminate against it without compromising Bitcoin's neutrality as a monetary network. If those tools are available to us, and they are in knots and they're being removed from core, and we decide not to use them, and the world comes after us saying, why are you all maintaining a ledger of disgusting graphic media? We're not going to have a good defense when we have plenty of tools available to us. We're not going to sit here saying, oh, people should have outbid the people putting that media in the chain, and they didn't. The fee market fixes everything. No, it doesn't. Personal responsibility is paramount. If you can't adopt it, then people are going to treat you like children, and we get infantilized and we get stupid return to the current monetary system because no one can run a node anymore because they couldn't do it responsibly. So we have regulated entities doing it for us. And that means centralized Bitcoin, centralized mining. I don't want to be a part of that because we know what it means. It means infantilization. It means you want to take more than $500 out of the ATM in one 24-hour period? You can't. You need to come into the branch to do that, and we're going to ask you a bunch of questions about what it is you want to do with the money. If you want to go and live in that world because you can't take responsibility for what your node is doing, or you're a miner and you can't take responsibility for what you're putting in the chain, then you invite other people doing that on behalf of an angry mob, a la democracy. Please don't turn Bitcoin into that. Understand that's the road you're going down, and prevent it by taking responsibility for what it is you're doing and not actively ignoring the tools available to you to not participate in making something worse when no one will believe you didn't have the tools available to you. All right, end of video.